A king got a letter from his own fleet commander, begging him to delay the voyage. Hurricane season had started. The ships were dangerously overloaded. 1,000 men were at risk. The king wrote back one word: no. 4 days later, every ship was on the bottom of the Atlantic. Every man was dead. And the order that killed them wasn't a mistake. It was math. July 1715, Havana Harbor. 11 Spanish galleons, 14 million silver pesos packed into their holds. Every coin a bankrupt empire has left. This is the story of how a king 3,000 miles from the water looked at a hurricane and chose it anyway. Because here's what the history books leave out. The hurricane didn't sink the Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire sank itself. The storm just delivered the verdict. Captain General Juan Esteban de Ubilla is walking the dock in Havana, and his flagship is riding so low that the gun ports are almost kissing the waterline. 120 tons of silver in the hold, probably more, unregistered, smuggled on board by merchants dodging the crown's tax. The ship is the Nuestra Señora de la Regla, and it shouldn't be sailing anywhere, let alone into hurricane season. But 3,000 miles away, in Madrid, King Philip V has just spent 14 years fighting a war that bled his treasury dry. The creditors are circling. He is being told, in the polite language diplomats use, that his empire is about to default in front of the entire world. There hasn't been a treasure fleet from the New World in over a decade. The Atlantic was too dangerous during the war. So every silver peso Mexico and Peru produced for 10 straight years has been sitting in colonial warehouses while Madrid bleeds out. He needs that silver. Not next year, not next season, now. So he gives the order. Combine everything. Mexican silver, South American gold, Caribbean pearls. A decade of trapped colonial wealth packed into 11 wooden ships. 14 million pesos. This isn't a shipment. This is the physical foundation of the Western economy. Ubilla writes to Madrid, "The ships are too heavy. The season is too late." Madrid writes back, "Sail." Because here's the thing about a bankrupt king. A hurricane is a statistical probability. A defaulted loan is a certainty. Philip V isn't choosing between safety and danger. He's choosing between possible disaster at sea and guaranteed disaster in Europe. He picks the storm. July 27th. The fleet leaves Havana. The air is heavy, oppressive, but the sky is a flawless pale blue. And for a sailor in 1715, that's all the meteorology you get. The ships catch the Gulf Stream, a marine conveyor belt that will push them up the Florida coast toward the open Atlantic. From there, straight shot to Spain. For 4 days, the weather holds. For 4 days, 1,000 men start to believe they're going to make it. And then something happens that nobody on the Spanish ships notices. And it's the most important moment of the entire voyage. There's a 12th ship in the convoy, a French merchant frigate, the Grifon. Spain had detained it in Havana because they didn't want its French crew leaking the fleet's departure date to pirates. So the Grifon is forced to sail with the Spanish. But the French captain is not carrying royal silver. His ship isn't dragging the weight of a bankrupt empire. And he is tired of crawling along at the pace of these overloaded galleons. So he breaks protocol. He pulls out of formation. He abandons the protective umbrella of the Spanish guns and accelerates ahead. One decision. That's all it is. That one decision saves every life on his ship. The Grifon sprints out of the kill zone. It will reach France in September, the only ship in the entire convoy that ever sees a European harbor again. The Spanish, sailing in disciplined formation, sail straight toward their grave. By the morning of July 30th, the fleet enters the mouth of the Bahama Channel, and geography turns on them. To the west, Florida's coast, lined with coral reefs that shred a hull in seconds. To the east, shallow sandbars where a ship that draws 16 feet has no business going. The Gulf Stream is pushing them north, fast, and they can't fight it. They are locked in. There is no exit. And Ubilla, standing on the deck of the Regla, watches the sky. The blue is changing, so preternaturally dark that by mid-afternoon, the crews have to light the stern lanterns, hours before sunset. Then the heat that's followed them since Havana just vanishes, and the wind dies. The overloaded galleons sit motionless, dead in the water. 11 ships, 1,000 men, 14 million pesos, frozen on a glass ocean, watching the horizon turn black. Every sailor knows it's coming. 2 in the morning, July 31st. The hurricane hits. A 100-mile-per-hour wall of wind comes off the Atlantic and slams into the fleet broadside. Canvas ripped from the masts in seconds. The rain isn't falling, it's flying, horizontally, hard enough to cut skin. Sailors on the deck of one galleon can't see the ship next to them in formation. The ocean churns into 40-foot walls of water, waves that don't roll, they collapse. And the storm surge picks up these 11 unsteerable ships and shoves them west, right into the reef. When the Regla hits, the lower hull is sheared off. The upper deck, with men still clinging to it, surfs shoreward on the massive waves, disintegrating as it goes. The Santo Cristo slams into the shoals so hard it snaps into 3 pieces. 1,000 chests of silver tumble into the churning black water. By dawn, it's over. 11 ships gone. 1,000 men dead, including Captain General Ubilla, floating in a miles-long debris field of timber, canvas, and bodies. 1,500 survivors stagger onto the sand, bleeding, dehydrated. And in Madrid, King Philip V doesn't know yet. He's still doing the math on what 14 million pesos will fix. The news reaches Cuba 11 days later. And here's where the story tells you what kind of empire we're dealing with. Spain does not send rescue ships. Spain does not send doctors, or food, or comfort. Spain sends salvage crews. The military rolls onto that Florida beach and sets up a fortified camp behind the dunes. They bring in enslaved indigenous and African divers, and they send them down 40 feet into cold, shark-infested water, clutching stones to pull them under, zero visibility, prying chests of silver from splintered timbers. Then up, fast, nitrogen expanding in their bloodstreams, the bends. Men surface paralyzed, men surface dead. Spain trades human lives for wet coins. And it works. By April 1716, 8 months after the wreck, they've recovered nearly 80% of the treasure. They stack it in hastily built wooden storehouses on the beach, guarded by 60 exhausted soldiers. The Crown thinks the worst is behind them. The Crown is wrong. Because 14 million pesos sitting on a beach is the most powerful magnet in the world. British sailors in Jamaica are deserting their posts to come wrecking. And the British governor sees the geopolitical opportunity of a lifetime. He hands out privateering commissions, official licenses to commit piracy against Spain, with quiet instructions to bleed the salvage camps dry. One of the men who takes a commission is Henry Jennings. Jennings is not a romantic pirate. He's a former Royal Navy officer with a business plan. 3 ships, 300 heavily armed men. On Christmas Day, he intercepts a Spanish mail boat and tortures the coordinates of the salvage camp out of its crew. December 28th, 3 in the morning, total darkness. Jennings lands his men on the freezing Florida beach. Lanterns out. They wait for first light. And then they do something terrifying. They don't charge. They beat heavy drum lines first, a rhythm that sounds like the disciplined approach of a massive army. Hundreds of marching feet that don't exist. Charles Vane storms the dunes, firing pistols and drawing fresh ones from a bandolier slung across his chest. The Spanish soldiers wake to deafening drums and lead snapping through the canvas of their tents. They try to form ranks on shifting sand. They can't. Outnumbered, outgunned, ambushed in the dark, the Spanish admiral surrenders without a real fight. The pirates walk into the storehouse like they're collecting groceries. They take 350,000 pesos. While the bodies of drowned Spanish sailors are still washing onto that same beach, pirates are carrying Spain's salvage treasury back to their boats. Jennings sails the silver to Nassau, and he uses that money, Spain's money, to fund what historians now call the Republic of Pirates, the golden age of piracy. Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Charles Vane himself, all of it capitalized by the silver Philip V refused to leave in Havana. Spain didn't just lose its fleet. Spain didn't just lose its salvage. Spain personally financed the rise of the men who would spend the next decade hunting Spanish ships across the Caribbean. The empire paid for its own predators. Back in Madrid, the crown is hollow, and it does what hollow empires always do. It manipulates the math. The following year, Spanish mints in Lima begin striking strange, crudely stamped coins. The clean, horizontal designs of traditional Spanish currency are gone, replaced by the fingerprint of a panicked, broken minting infrastructure. Then comes the decree. The crown officially reduces the amount of silver in every peso. And this is the part most people miss. When you debase your currency, you don't just lose value, you broadcast your collapse to every merchant on Earth. Foreign traders weigh the new coins. They check the silver content. They know instantly. The price of every Spanish peso, everywhere in the world, drops. Spain never recovers. It never returns to being the financial capital of the Western world. The 18th century belongs to Britain, to France, to the Dutch. Spain becomes a former superpower telling stories about itself. And it all traces back to one decision, made in one room, 3,000 miles from the water. Today, off a stretch of Florida coastline, officially called the Treasure Coast, divers still pull pieces of 8 out of the sand after every big storm. Most are clean, heavy, stamped with the pillars and crosses of a Spanish empire at full strength. But every so often, a diver surfaces holding a different coin, crude, off-center, lighter in the hand than it should be. A peso struck in the panic after 1715, the year the crown started cutting the silver to hide what it had lost. You can hold one of those coins right now. They sell at auction. They sit in museum cases in Tallahassee and Madrid. That coin is not a souvenir of a hurricane. It is the receipt for a decision. A king looked at a storm, measured it against his own debt, and chose the storm. The ocean did what the ocean does. The empire did the rest. And 3 centuries later, the weight of what's missing from that coin is still the most honest thing left of the Spanish Empire.